our guest today. I'm so excited that for the first time we have Dr. Ruan Melmed, and he's going to tell me if I've entirely butchered his name. He is, get this. And you can always tell when people send you their bios, and like I had already gotten his bio, and it's pages of the things that he's done, the articles that he's written, the books that he's written, the committees and the boards and everything that he is on. But here is what he sent me, because it's all the big things, right? He's a developmental pediatrician, a behavioral pediatrician. He is the director of the Melmed Center in Scottsdale, Arizona, and the co-founder and medical director of the Southwest Autism Research and Resource Center. That's pretty amazing. But he is also an author many times over, and that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about today. He's got a series of books called Marvin's Monster Diary, and then there's also Timmy and Harriet's Monster Diary that take on very specific topics. We're going to talk with him about that, like ADHD attacks is one of them, screen time attacks, awfully anxious, but I squish it big time. Amazing books to read with, to, or have your child read. But also he has an amazing book that is out, that is the Autism Parent Handbook. I live in awe. Please welcome with me to the show, Dr. Ruan Melmed. Am I saying your name properly?
You're saying it absolutely incorrectly.
Okay, I'm going to have to say it.
Okay, no, it's actually first of all, it's RAU, so it's rhymes with Sean. So think of Sean and then say Ron.
Okay, Ron. Okay, that's so helpful. I wish I'd asked beforehand, so I didn't slaughter it before. Am I saying Melmed right?
You say that beautifully.
Okay, we don't want to mess that up. I just think it's so funny when people's names match what they do. And so here you have the last name Med, and you've gone into medicine. It was always meant to be. Do you feel that?
You know, from the age of 9, after reading Dibs in Search of Self, for those of you who ever know that classic about a child with autism, I knew that I was going to go into developmental pediatrics.
Wow. That's amazing. I don't know this book, so you're going to have to tell me more about that before we're done. And you read it at 9. So I guess what is the name of the book again?
It's called Dibs, Dibs, Dibs,
Okay.
in search of self, which is it's a classic. I'm not even sure if it's in print anymore, but it was certainly a classic in its day.
All right, I'm going to have to find this. We're going to search old bookstores to find this. So, Dr. Melmed, there is so much to talk about with you, but I want to first talk about some books that you have out. You fairly recently, the book, the Autism Parent Handbook, came out. Can you talk to us a little bit about why? I mean, we all know why it's important, but why was it important to you to do this book?
Well, I think that the Autism Parent Handbook is a book that relates to the nitty-gritty challenges that parents have every single day. And these are the problems that in my office, people, knock on the door and ask about. My child has meltdown at parties and I can't take him there. My child is an embarrassment to his siblings or to her siblings, and that puts them into a bad mood. My husband doesn't quite know how to deal with them, and that sets us up for challenges between the two. My parents-in-law interfere, and they've got all their ideas about how I should be raising my child. That's problematic. My own sister, who has got perfect children, and she's always been perfect. She's driving me nuts, and she's not being a help at all. I need to figure out how to harness my own strengths. I need to get back in touch with who I am as an individual. I want to remember that I'm a mother first who happens to have a child with autism. And I want to figure out who I am and what my journey is going to be about. So the parent handbook is exactly about that. When you go into the doctor's office, how am I supposed to prepare my child? My child hates going to the doctor. He misbehaves. Everything's a mess. The doctor treats him inappropriately. I don't know quite how to explain to them what the importance of their sensory challenges are, or anything else for that matter. And going to the emergency room, of course, is like all hell can break loose in that context. So these are the questions that parents have, and that when we were sitting around and thinking about a book that parents really wanted, this was one of them which came up, and it's happily been very well received, and it's it's got to do with things as well. How to prepare for the future. What am I supposed to think about when my child graduates? When am I supposed to start preparing for that? Um, so it's a pretty broad book, I would say, but it goes from the very earliest time, in which is a particularly interesting time, an important time for me, all the way through to adulthood.
Love it. Absolutely love it. But there's another series of books that you have written that I think are really also helpful and supportive. Talk to us a little bit about the Monster Diaries. And Traven's got some of the book covers to show here.
Yeah.
Um,
Those are them. It's funny. I just got on Friday, last Friday, I got somebody sent me these books in Chinese. They've been translated into
oh,
Chinese, so
amazing.
that's been fun. But I tell you what the basic is. But the basis of it is a strong belief on my behalf of, regardless of the level of functioning of any individual, they have to be involved in their own treatment. I try to teach the residents, when you have a very severely disabled adult male with autism who's nonverbal, who might be self-injurious, you look at them directly in the eye and you speak to them about what's going on and what it is you want to do. Don't speak to them as if they're not even in the room and just direct him. I have to, at all costs, try and involve the individual in their own treatment from the very earliest. How are we going to do this? I've got to get the kids involved. And one of the ways that children might get involved is learning from a third party that maybe they're superheroes in their lives, have similar challenges. And that way they can not feel their mum and saying, none of that, and don't do that, and stop this, and etc., etc. But they themselves can have tools to change, to make a difference in their own lives. And when a child is able to face a challenge and make a difference in their own life at whatever baby step it might be, the outcome is enormous. And bibliotherapy, or the use of books to teach children, to improve children, that's the term I use, bibliotherapy, is the series. So ST4 is the title of the series. It's one S and four T's. The one S says stop, and the T's are take, time, to think. ST4, think the STP motor oil. Anyway, the ST4 thing is when a child is having a meltdown or having a breakdown, there are lots of different ways in which you can make them aware of their behaviors. I'm sure you know them, and I'm sure you've had guest review. You can have them color coded. You can have them leveled from 1 to 10. You can have pictures of happy faces and sad faces, those kinds of things. And you can also, if the child is capable, say ST4, stop, take time to think. A teacher can walk over to the child and wink at them and say ST4, or just point to the ST4 sticker. Once a child is able to stop and think about their behavior and get themselves out of that vicious cycle,
Mhm.
wonderful things can arise. And that's true for anxiety, aggression, ADHD, socialization problems, which is of course particularly interesting for individuals with who have social communication challenges. It can all make a difference once you stop and think. Changes happen, all for the good.
Amazing. I think we need to have this in all areas of life for people who aren't on the spectrum, right? All adults need to participate in this. So, where can we get the books? Because these are amazing books, all of the ones that you just went, both the ST4 series and the Parent Handbook. Where can we get them?
I think Amazon, is the life of the party, in fact, of any book. But Amazon is certainly there. Future Horizons, Familius Publications, or the ST4s through Familius Publications. But I think that the easiest way always for all of these books is Amazon.
There we
Um,
go.
and I think the prices are the best there too.
There
Um,
you go. That's an important thing too. We need to save a couple of bucks. So you've been amazing in the field and have a lot of different areas that people pay attention to what you say because you've been helping families for quite a period of time, and we appreciate all the work that you've done. Talk to us a little bit about from your point of view, what can we do to help parents, what with that first response when they've been diagnosed, because it's a big day, right, when your child is diagnosed with autism, and it's a hump that people have to get over. What wise words do you have for us, for those who are newly diagnosed?
you know, Making a diagnosis of autism is is one of the most difficult things. When you first tell a young a parent, a couple, 25, 26 years old, and with dreams of what's going to happen, that their child has autism, let me tell you, even as I'm speaking right now, it sends shivers through me
Mhm.
because I don't think there's anything quite as traumatic that people can go through about hearing the news that their dream might just not be. In fact, it might even be shattered for that matter. So there's a number of different things. Now, I want to focus maybe on two. The first thing is that when that hearing of a child with having autism, parents go through a grieving response, which is the exact same as the responses that people have when a loved one dies. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross many years ago wrote a book on death and dying, and she spoke about the challenges that people have when a loved one dies, to do with denial and anger and and depression, um, and the way I see it, that individuals, parents who have children diagnosed for the first time, go through those same stages. And it is so important for clinicians, but for parents as well as grandparents, to recognize this is what's happening with my child. And the thing is that the mother or the father or the two mothers or the two fathers, whatever the case might be, don't necessarily go through those same stages at the same time. So the mother might be, let's go, I want to get moving on this. And the father say, this is a waste of time. That doctor always makes the diagnosis that it's diagnosis du jour. It's just it's made up in people's minds. The pharmacological companies are just trying to make a buck. Forget about it. I'm not going there. Why did you even go and take the child to have it? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. That kind of anger and that kind of denial. And then the mother saying, oh my God, well, what's happening over here? Who's going to be there for me? Who's going to financially support me? Is my marriage going to survive this whole damn thing? And who asked for it? And God, where were you? And why is this happening to me? So recognition of those stages is absolutely essential. And when I see parents back in follow up in the first few years, even months, years, even, because it takes a long time to work through these grieving process, it's the primary thing that I want to look at. I'm more interested in looking at that than almost looking at the child, because a depressed mother or a depressed father has very negative outcome implications for a child. If a mother doesn't feel solid within herself, comfortable, supported, feel capable and competent, we must work to make sure that that happens. So the first step, and I know I've gone through this pretty quickly, is to be able to recognize the stages of grieving. And second step is knowledge. Knowledge is the most powerful coping tool that there is. And thanks to podcasts like yours and the websites that you mentioned and many other organizations, I think we recognize that more than possibly any other disorder, parents banding together, sharing their information, sharing their experiences, putting it out there and supporting each other and learning, that's an incredibly important coping tool. Because once you feel, I've got a handle on this, I can do something about this. I'm not going to be that sit down on my knees like you did when you told that very poignant story and be a puddle, a mess of tears. I'm going to reconstitute. I'm going to tell myself, you can do this. You are going to do this. And that's the final stage of grieving. when you recognize that despite the fact that there might be these challenges, I am capable of overcoming it. I can work on my child's behalf. I can self advocate. I can educate myself. I'm going to make a difference in my child's life. And when I hear that kind of passion in a mother's voice when she comes back, I can take a sigh of relief because I know, regardless of the different therapies, regardless of the supplements and the medications or ABA, whatever else, this child is going to be okay. And the family is going to be okay. And that's the goal.
I love this. You're singing the song that I think a lot of us believe, and I just want to say that there's just a plethora of studies now that are showing exactly what Dr. Melmed is saying, that if a parent is centered and taking care of themselves and hopeful, that we do see better outcomes across the board. So it becomes important for all of us to help each other to be on this path. You can see why so many people love you, Dr. Melmed, and why they want to come to you, because I think this is the heart of all of it, and often overlooked. It is so refreshing to hear somebody from the medical field talking about treating the whole family. So in fact, let's talk about the fact that when someone is diagnosed with autism, it does have an impact on the whole family, including grandparents and siblings and so on and so forth. So you've talked very passionately about the parents, but then how do you include the whole family and look at the impact?
Well, two things. I always say two things because I'm not quite sure how many things to say. But anyway, two things. Okay. First thing, siblings. So important. If I can at all possible, I tell parents that when you come back to me for any kind of follow-up, please bring the brother and the sister if there happens to be one in the family. And as soon as that happens, I address the sibling right then and there. And I let them know. Do you know, Sally, that a lot of brothers and sisters have told me that they get very embarrassed when they have a brother and sister with autism? A lot of other kids have told me that, Sally. Do you know that, Sally, a lot of kids sisters, older sisters of children with autism, they feel left out. And they feel that their parents don't always include them, and they wish they would. And they feel blamed sometimes because they're always told, you should know better because your little brother has got problems. And they're sick of hearing that. And sometimes they get very mad and very sad. I don't think that could happen to you. And the mother would say, oh, no, she's fantastic. She's fantastic. And then I look over at Sally, and Sally's saying, yeah, sometimes I do feel like that. Yeah. And I know, because I've done sibling support programs with these kids, that even at the age of 7 and 8, kids like Sally know that one day they might be the person who has to take care of their little brother and sister, and they are dead scared of that. Are they going to tell their parents that? I don't think so. Not very readily. But the reason I tell them all these kinds of things is just to let them know these are typical responses of typical children, and they're okay. It's all right to express yourself in that way. And the child loves it and laps it up because they recognize someone is basically giving them a voice. And yes, siblings, of course, are at risk for themselves. We know that autism is a genetic condition, that clearly the brothers and sisters of children with autism will have anxiety and social relationship problems, and anorexia and other kind of issues such as that. So yes, they might be at risk despite anything else. But simply having a brother or sister with a disability can be an extraordinary challenge. And recognizing that is essential. That's one. Two, we are very fortunate in Phoenix at our Southwest Autism Research Center to have a grandparent support group. And let me tell you, for those of you ever visiting Phoenix, to come to one of our grandparent support groups and see 100 parents wrapped in attention once a month, eating cookies and drinking coffee and listening to an expert talk to them about different aspects of autism, and them sharing their own war stories about what it's like to have a grandchild who didn't fulfill your dream, and a daughter who's crazy, and a son-in-law who's even worse. To have that opportunity, it is just delightful. If any community wants to start something of value, sibling support groups, 1,000%. But grandparent support groups, what a way to go.
I just want to hug you. And our audience is feeling that way too. Somebody wrote in and said, "Thank you, sir. You give me hope." Isn't that the truth? But a lot of people have tuned in today because they're very interested in the biomedical ends of autism. And so I wondered if you could take just a second to talk about some of the behavior symptoms that could be caused by medical problems.
Okay. Now, well, there goes my. When I do Zoom, this happens to
There
me
we
all
go.
the time, and the kids love it. Anyway, okay. Disclosure number one.
Yes.
The disclosure will come. Well, you were talking earlier, and I saw the title up on the screen. I thought of Carol Gray's social stories. This is my social story of the day for all of you in the audience. Sometimes I tune into a talk and they tell me that I'm going to learn about biomedical problems. Then the expert says, I am not a biomedical expert. I feel terrible. But then I take a deep breath. I count to three. 1, 2, 3. Social story, Carol Gray. I count to three and I tell myself, well, maybe he'll talk about something different. And then I feel better. Okay, so just a little bit about biomedical. I was an original doctor with Dr. Bernie Rimland on the DAN, the Defeat Autism Now issue. I don't classify myself in the generic way as a biomedical doctor any longer. I see myself very much as a developmental behavioral approach, maybe a neurobiological or a biopsychosocial approach. But aside from that, one of my interests, especially in teaching young pediatric residents, and for that matter, emergency room residents who I teach on a regular basis here in Phoenix at the universities, um, is to, when they get a child in the emergency room, how to make sure that they've ruled out medical problems. And I'm not going to get all fancy with you about magnesium levels or about anything. I'm going to talk about when I get a child in, and these are all specific cases, and I'll just give you 3 or 4 of them to give you a flavor of what I'm talking about. I've got one child who used to karate chop herself in the head. Gua, 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 gua. Big girl, huge girl. She once hit her father, a very irritable girl, in the face, like in front of me. The father went down, a big guy went down straight like that. She knocked him out. She didn't mean to do that, but she was. And then we wondered, why did this young girl always, this is a girl from Arizona, why did she always do this stuff? This was quite a few years ago. And then during the course of a secretin or a secretin trial, when we injecting it was supposed to be one of the cures for autism. And part of the trial involved putting a scope down the child's throat to see what the secretin was doing when we were injecting it in the duodenum. The gastroenterologist who was doing this procedure as part of the study called me and said, I just looked at her esophagus, this girl's esophagus. She's got erosions from the top to her bottom. She's got severe esophagitis. This girl who was nonverbal, severe developmental delays, karate chopping herself in the head, knocking her father unconscious in front of me, no a word of a lie, actually had esophagitis. Boy, did we look stupid. Did we look stupid? Did our parents, when they heard this, they couldn't believe this? She was treated for her severe esophagitis. It was a different person. She would have gone to the emergency room. She would have put onto Haldol or something like that. God, you're acting like out of control. What's wrong with you? Another quick story, and I can tell you these war stories, many of them. Another quick story. One of the members of our board of directors, she had a child had glasses. He would take off his glasses and smash them. She got new glasses and repeated them. She got a rubber band to put around the back so the glasses would stay in his face, so she would stop having to repair his glasses. Finally, she went to an optometrist who looked at the pair of glasses she brought in and said, hey, somebody switched the lenses. One side is like 20 over like 600 and the other side is normal. We had got it on the wrong side. This little boy didn't want to wear his glasses because he couldn't see when they were on. Now, whether it's otitis media, whether it's sex abuse, whether it is ADHD, whether it's sleep disruption, whether it's protozoal infection, fungal infections. They can all look like the typical problems that children have day to day. Their child might be scratching their bums. They might have a protozoal or fungal infection. They might be irritable. They might have severe sleep disruption at night. And which kid isn't going to be irritable when you do that? There can be lots of different examples of typical medical problems, and I will go through all the systems of the body to try and teach the residents. When a mother comes into your office and tells you their child is impossible, before you jump and say, they got autism. What are you going to do? That's what autism is. Before you jump to that, make sure their eyes are straight. Make sure that they are hearing. Make sure you've looked at the teeth to make sure there are no dental abscesses. Make sure you've looked in the ears. It's very hard to look in the ears of a kid who's screaming and shouting and hates being touched. Make sure you feel the stomach. Make sure you do a physical examination. So when I think of the medical problems, the common medical, because these are children first who happen to have autism. And that's the message, because a lot of parents will tell me. And there's one classic example I used as a quote in the book, The Parent Handbook. I don't tell the doctor my child has autism, because from then on, everything else that'll happen. They'll say, oh, it's autism. It's autism. What are you going to do? They have severe butt burning diarrhea 8 or 10 times a day. It's autism.
And it's not. So if from the other side, as parents, or for our individuals who are adults who are watching, who are on the spectrum, what advice do you give us when we go before the doctor to get the doctor to listen?
Oh, brother. Well, it's not too terribly different to compare to going to whatever doctor you're going to. I think it's always nice before anyone goes to the doctor to have an agenda, for you to actually write down 3 things. The doctors are busy. To find a primary care doctor today is absolutely impossible. I just got a referral from one of the board members saying, please, can you help me? And my adult son needs a primary care doctor. For love or money, I couldn't find one. If who's also going to be seeing adults, they're going to come back and see me. And I don't do primary care, but there's no one else who's going to be doing it. It's very hard. But one of the things, if you're lucky enough to find that, and by the way, usually a good place to find primary care for adults is through a major hospital's family practice residency program, Mayo Clinic's residency program, St. Joseph's residency program. There's a lot of residency program on a health. I'm just giving you 3 examples of those in Phoenix, but I'm sure in most communities they are there. That's where you can find. Then go inside to the doctor and say, I have an agenda. These are my 3 specific questions that I want to have, and write them down. And there can't be more than 7 or 8 words in the question, because your time is going to be limited, and you want to make sure that you get out of that office visit with your questions being answered. And when the doc sees you being prepared, she's going to look at that list and she's going to say to you, I'm going to answer these questions. But if you're coming in with reams of paper and lots of things to look at and expecting all that to happen in 10 minutes, you know as well as I do, it ain't going to happen.
Yeah. 7 or 8 words. That I'm going to write that on a pillow. We're running out of time. So I want to talk about the overlap between autism and ADHD, because this is a big topic.
Yeah, well, a lot of people think that, that it's a constant. Well, first of all, we think that about 15% of children with ADHD, which of course is very common, about 15% of them have autism spectrum disorder, have been diagnosed with ASD. That's one interesting fact. Interesting fact number 2. Young adults or adolescents or young adults who've been diagnosed with ASD for the first time at that age invariably have had a previous mental health diagnosis of, guess what? ADHD. So it's very easy, especially with individuals who are low support needs, who might be verbal, very early on, it's difficult to look at those individuals and to identify the kids with autism, because we still have the preconceived notion that most kids with autism are going to be nonverbal, have severe behavioral problems, lots of stimming, and we know that many low support needs individuals don't look like that at all. That's why at SARC, Southwest Autism Research Center, and our website is autismcenter.org, autismcenter.org, we have developed a free screen, a standardized screen for elementary age children, children who've previously passed a screen between 18 and 24 months for autism. So people think, oh, they're free and clear, only to find out later on during a screen which you can go onto our website, download it free, and we also have an app called Think Autism, which has the same downloadable um, uh, test. You can physicians go, or anybody can write their own name and call, you can use it. It's public domain because it was done by a grant. But we're very interested in doing screening for elementary school age children. I also want to do screening, and I know we're nearly out of time, for one important group, marriage counselors.
Mm.
When I'm getting more referrals of adults, by the way, even though I'm a developmental pediatrician, I only see adults these days because there's no one who sees adults, and all the rest of the people in my group are seeing kids. But so many of them are coming from marriage counselors who start to take a history of why marriages are falling apart, why the man who was seemingly such a kind, considerate person who was always on time, made a good living, suddenly after 4 years of marriage, the marriage is falling apart because of lack of conversation, lack of intimacy, and other issues. And the astute marriage counselor will say, you know what? This might actually be ASD. Why don't you go have an assessment? That's a particular area of interest. We covered a very broad range of topics here today. Oh my
We
God.
did, we did. So let me ask you this though. So because we have adults 3 times a week that will say to us, "Where can I go to get evaluated?"
Oh,
And so obviously they could come to you in Arizona. But if they aren't in Arizona, what do you recommend?
you know what? The truth be told is that at this point, I've actually closed my practice to new adults.
Mm.
But so don't rush to Arizona,
Don't rush
please.
to Arizona. Okay.
Don't rush to Arizona. So
Okay.
I think that this should be one of the big topics on websites, that people should say, collect information about who in our area is actually making the diagnosis. I think calling the Autism Society of America's local chapters, finding out from them, looking on the Autism Speaks website to finding out from them. They've got a great state by state section with different resources in different states to have that being done. A lot of adult psychologists and adult psychiatrists are not used to making the diagnosis. I just saw an adult neurologist doing the evaluation of individual. In 15 minutes, they looked at them and they said to him, you're not autistic. And come on, and did you do any testing whatsoever? Oh no, I just have that feeling, And we want, our motto for ABA and for this is, in God we trust. The rest of the world bring data. So
I
so
love
we want to
that.
see data. If somebody wants to make the diagnosis, if you're going to see someone, make sure that they're using standardized instruments in order to make their diagnosis, because simply following your gut feeling is not good enough.
Amazing. Okay, Dr. Melmed, we're almost out of time. I want to go back to some of the resources that you talked about. If people are in Southwest Arizona, and after watching this, everybody wants to spend an hour with you in a room. Uh, but tell us a little bit about your center and how they can connect with your center, not necessarily with you, because everybody can't
Okay,
have
sure.
your
So
time.
there's two centers that I'm involved with. Number one is the Melmed Center, melmedcenter.com, melmedcenter.com, and that's evaluation of adults and children with a whole variety of developmental problems. And that's very much like almost a private child development center, child adult development center. That's the one thing. The website number two is autismcenter.org. That's Southwest Autism Research Center. That's where I do all my research. We have a lot of research projects which I'm involved with. We're doing fabulous research. Adults, we're using digital therapeutics, the use of games to improve children, adults with ADHD. That's at the Melmed Center. I don't want to confuse people. But at Southwest Autism Research Center, autismcenter.org, number one has the grandparents group that I mentioned. Number two, they also have that app that I mentioned for the evaluation, the screening, mind you, not diagnosis, of school-age children who have previously passed other screens for autism, but where so this should be done whole school-wide, not on individuals. We screen schools. We don't screen individuals. We have to do a broad net. So those would be the two websites I would look at, or SARC, autismcenter.org, where the grandparents group is just wonderful. We have our sister organization, which is called firstplaceaz.org, firstplaceaz.org, which is
So sorry.
which
It's my
is
son calling me.
no, give
So
him my
sorry.
regards.
Yes.
But First Place is if please, everybody, go to firstplaceaz.org and look at the video describing how that transitional programs, it's a residential program for 2 years where you get an AA degree in individual independent living, and then you go to the community. If you want to see state-of-the-art transitional programs for adults with who otherwise were thought to be not capable of independence, look at First Place. It's
First Place.
amazing. It's a jewel. People come from all over the world just to look at it. Right now, just go onto their website, firstplaceaz.org, and look at the video, and your tongue will hang out.
All right. We're going to have you come back and talk more about some of these things because we didn't have enough time, and you are delightful. I want to thank you so much for being here. I also want to acknowledge that Jessa, who wrote in and said, I'm a high functioning adult. And I want to acknowledge that there was quite a conversation while we were talking about mostly from the Crooked Trail, about Arizona and how things are so dire and people like you are needed in Arizona, and how people who are level 3 have been shamed. But we are entirely out of time. We will continue this conversation and we'll invite Dr. Melmed to come back with us. But please check out some of the resources. Watch the show back, listen to the show back, because there were so many resources, too many things to repeat right here. I appreciate you so much for being with us, Dr. Melmed. I want to remind everybody that we're back tomorrow. Little schedule change this week. We're going to have Ask Dr. Doreen with Dr. Doreen Granpichet on Wednesday this week. Tomorrow, we're welcoming 2 amazing guests. We have an expert who's going to be talking with us about the number 1 cause of death for our individuals who are on the spectrum, swimming danger, and that, what we can be doing to mitigate that. And we also have someone who's going to be talking with us about the 1 in 44 summit that's happening in August. So it'll be a great show tomorrow. And don't forget that we will be here for live with Ask Dr. Doreen on Wednesday. Thank you so much. I'll see you tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Thank you so much, Dr. Melmed.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching Autism Live. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.
To subscribe, click here. And if you'd like to check out some more of our videos, click here.